The punishment ground was silent. It was a wide square made of stone, surrounded by tall walls of gray metal. The air was heavy with heat, and the scent of iron drifted from the whips that hung on the racks. Crowds of aliens had gathered, their tall frames casting long shadows across the ground. They had come to see justice, or what they believed was justice. At the center stood a young alien girl, no more than 16 by human years. Her skin glowed faintly blue, her silver hair tangled as she bowed her head in shame. She had broken a rule, a sacred rule that no one dared to touch. She had taken food from the Emperor's storehouse, not for greed, but for hunger. Her hands shook as the soldiers dragged her forward, chains rattling at her wrists. The commander raised his voice, sharp and cold. For her crime, she will take 10 lashes, he declared. The crowd hissed, some in anger, some in delight. The girl closed her eyes, her body trembling. Her brothers were away on patrol. No one stood for her. She was alone, and all knew what was to come. In the crowd stood a man, a human worker. His name was Joran. Plain and simple, he wore rough clothes, his back bent from long hours of labor. His skin was scarred from years under alien whips, his hands calloused from carrying stone. Humans were servants here, shadows at the edge of alien pride. They were not meant to speak, not meant to stand out. But Joran stepped forward, his voice cut across the silence, firm but calm. "I will take her punishment," he said. The crowd gasped, laughter and shock rippling through them like fire. A human daring to speak was rare. A human daring to offer himself was madness. The commander turned, his skilled face twisting into a sneer. "You," he said, spitting the word like poison. "You would take lashes meant for her." Joran's jaw tightened, but his voice did not falter. "Yes," he answered, "she is a child. She does not deserve this pain." The aliens erupted with jeers, some shouting, some laughing. "A human has no right," one barked. "Let him die if he wishes," another snarled. The commander studied Joran for a long moment, his lips curled into a cruel smile. "Very well," he said. "If you wish to suffer, you shall." The girl lifted her head, her eyes wide with fear. "No," she whispered, "please, don't." But Joran only gave her a small nod, his eyes calm. He stepped forward as the soldiers dragged him to the post. The chains clanged as they bound his arms, his back bare under the cruel sun. The whip was uncoiled, long and black, tipped with metal claws. The crowd grew silent, leaning forward, waiting. The commander raised his hand, and the first lash struck. It tore across Joran's back with a crack that echoed like thunder. Blood welled. His body shuddered, but he did not cry out. The second lash came, harder, slicing deeper into flesh. His breath hissed, his muscles tensed, but still he remained silent. The third lash fell, and the fourth, each strike drawing gasps from the crowd. They had expected him to scream, to fall, to beg for mercy, but Joran stood, his fists clenched, his jaw set. By the fifth lash, his back was a canvas of blood. The young alien girl wept, struggling against the soldiers who held her back. "Stop, please, stop," she cried, her voice breaking. But the commander ignored her, raising the whip again. The sixth lash struck, and then the seventh. Joran staggered, but caught himself, forcing his knees to lock. Each blow sent fire through his body, but his eyes stayed forward. The crowd was no longer laughing. Whispers spread, low and uncertain. "Why does he endure?" one asked. "How can a human take such pain?" The eighth lash cut deeper, and his breath faltered. The ninth lash shook him, his vision darkening. But when the 10th lash fell, he still stood, blood dripping down his back, his body trembling, but unbroken. The whip fell silent, the commander's arm lowering slowly. For the first time, there was no laughter, no jeers, only silence, heavy and sharp. The commander sneered, trying to cover his unease. "Take him down," he ordered. "Let him rot with his scars." The soldiers unchained him, his body falling to one knee. But before they could drag him away, he lifted his head, his eyes met the girl's, and he whispered, Hoarse but clear, "You are safe now." The crowd shifted, uneasy, for in that moment, something had changed. A human had taken pain not for himself, but for one of them. And though the girl wept, her brothers were not yet there to see. The next day, they would return, and the punishment ground would never be the same again. Asterisk 10 Luscious morning sun burned hot above the punishment ground. Its light fell on Joran's torn back, his skin streaked with fresh wounds that glistened with blood. The crowd had not moved, their voices hushed, their eyes locked on the human who stood where no human should. 10 lashes had been promised, and 10 lashes would fall. The commander raised his arm again, the whip curling like a serpent in the air. The crowd leaned forward, breath caught. Joran gritted his teeth, his fists bound tight to the post. The second lash struck with a sound like breaking bone. His body shook, blood spraying, but no cry escaped his lips. The third lash came sharper, crueler. It tore open skin already bruised, leaving a mark deep as claw scratches. The aliens hissed, some in awe, some in disgust. The young alien girl cried out, struggling against the guards who held her back. Her silver hair whipped across her face as she screamed, "Stop! He is not the one who sinned." But no one listened. The fourth lash came, then the fifth. Each strike rang through the air like thunder. Joran's head sagged, his breath heavy, yet still he stood. The commander narrowed his eyes, sweat dripping from his brow. He had whipped countless humans before. They always broke by the third. This one did not. By the sixth lash, the whip was stained with his blood. The commander's arm ached, but pride drove him on. He wanted to hear the scream, the begging, the collapse. Instead, he saw only silence, only stubborn strength. The crowd had grown restless, whispers circling like smoke. "Why does he endure?" One alien muttered. "He should have fallen." Another hissed. The seventh lash fell, and Joran staggered forward, his knees buckling, gasps rose. But somehow he caught himself, his feet planted, his shoulders square, his body trembling but unbroken. The young alien girl sobbed, her voice breaking, "Please, no more. You will kill him." But the commander sneered, "This is justice," he spat. "And justice has no mercy." The eighth lash cracked, tearing flesh and leaving a scar that would never heal. The ninth lash followed, heavier, crueler. Blood ran down his back in rivers, dripping to the stone below. The crowd no longer mocked. They only watched in silence, for what they saw was not weakness, but something they could not name. The commander raised his arm for the 10th and final strike. The whip hissed through the air, slamming across Joran's back with the force of a hammer. The sound echoed, sharp and final. Joran's body shuddered, his breath catching, his vision fading to black. Yet when the soldiers moved to catch him, he shook his head, slowly, painfully. He forced himself upright, his back torn open, his skin a map of scars and blood. But his head held high, the square was silent. Not even the wind dared to move. Every alien stared, their glowing eyes wide with disbelief. A human had taken 10 lashes, and still he stood. No scream, no plea for mercy, no collapse into dust, only silence, heavy and unshakable. The commander lowered the whip, his hand trembling. For the first time, he felt shame. He turned sharply and barked, "Unkind him." The soldiers obeyed, their claws fumbling as they unlocked the bonds. Joran staggered forward, nearly falling, but he caught himself on one knee. The alien girl broke free of her guards, rushing to his side. Her small hands touched his arm. Trembling, "Why?" she whispered, tears running down her face. "Why would you suffer for me?" Joran's voice was hoarse, broken, yet steady. "No one deserves pain for hunger," he whispered. "Better me than you." The crowd stirred, uncertain. Some sneered, muttering that he was a fool, but others stared in silence, something shifting deep within them. They had been raised to see humans as weak, as less. Yet here stood one who had endured what many of them could not. The commander barked for order, waving his soldiers to clear the ground. But the silence of the crowd pressed heavier than any command. They had seen the truth, and truth could not be lashed away. That night, the story spread through the colony. Whispers carried it from house to house. from warrior barracks to temple halls. Did you hear? They said. A human took 10 lashes, and he did not fall. Others added. The alien girl's brothers heard it too, warriors hardened by battle. At first, they scoffed, refusing to believe. No human could endure such pain, one growled. But the whispers did not stop, and doubt began to creep into their pride. In his quarters, Joran lay on his stomach, his back bandaged with rough cloth. The alien girl slipped inside quietly, carrying water and food. He looked up weakly, managing a faint smile. You should not be here, he said. His voice strained. She shook her head, setting the bowl beside him. You should not have been there, she whispered, her eyes glistening. But you were. He closed his eyes, the pain heavy, but his words calm. I would do it again, he whispered. For you, the girl's hands trembled, her heart heavy. She had never seen a human as anything but a servant, but now she saw him as something else, something stronger. The bond of pain had already begun to weave between them, and soon, her brothers would see it too. The brothers' ice story of the lashes spread faster than fire in dry grass. By nightfall, every corner of the alien colony whispered about the human who had stood against the whip. No one could believe it, yet none could deny it. They had seen him endure, and the memory clung to them like smoke. In the barracks of the warrior caste, the alien girl's brothers returned from patrol. They were tall, broad-shouldered, their skin glowing faintly blue under the torchlight. Their armor was scarred from countless battles. Their names carried respect in every hall. They were proud, fierce, and known for their hatred of humans. To them, humans were weak, fragile, and always in need of protection or pity. When they entered, younger warriors rushed to them, speaking quickly. Your sister was punished today, one said. She stood in chains before the crowd. The brothers froze, their eyes narrowing. What? The eldest growled, his voice sharp as steel. Why was I not told? Another demanded, slamming his fist against the wall. The tale spilled out, carried by a dozen voices at once. They told of the punishment ground, of the whip, of the girl's tears. But most of all, they told of the human. They spoke of Joran stepping forward, of offering himself for their sister. They told of how he endured 10 lashes, bleeding but unbroken. They swore the crowd saw it. The commander himself saw it. The brothers exchanged looks, their faces dark with disbelief. A lie, the youngest spat. No human could do such a thing. He is trying to trick her. The middle brother growled, perhaps to win her favor. But the eldest stayed silent, his jaw tight, his eyes troubled. He had fought many humans in training pits. He knew their weakness. Yet the voices around him carried no doubt, and doubt crept into his own mind. That night, the brothers returned to their home. Their sister lay awake, her eyes red from crying. When she saw them, she rushed into their arms. You were not there, she sobbed. He saved me. He took it all. The eldest held her shoulders, his voice calm but stern. Who, little one, who took your punishment? She swallowed, her lips trembling. Joran, she whispered. The human. The room fell silent, heavy as stone. The brothers stared at her in shock. The youngest snarled, turning away. He is nothing but a slave. You shame us by speaking his name. But the girl shook her head fiercely, tears streaking her cheeks. You did not see, you did not hear. He stood for me when no one else would. Her words cut deep, sharper than any blade. The middle brother slammed his hand against the table. This is madness, he hissed. A human cannot endure what even our warriors fear. But the eldest's gaze lingered on his sister's eyes. She was no liar. Her voice carried truth, and truth was harder to ignore than pride. That night, when the house grew quiet, the brothers sat together in silence. The fire crackled in the hearth, but no warmth touched them. The youngest finally muttered, if he truly endured, he is not human. The middle growled, if he tricked her, he must die. But the eldest spoke slowly, his voice heavy with thought. If he endured, then perhaps he is more than we believed. The words hung in the air, dangerous and strange. For warriors like them, honor was everything. And if a human had shown honor greater than theirs, It was a wound to their pride, but it was also a spark of something else: respect. The next morning, the brothers sought the truth. They went to the punishment ground, where the stones still bore dark stains of blood. They touched the marks left by the whip. They asked the guards, the workers, the crowd. Every voice told the same story. The human had taken 10 lashes, and still he stood. By the time they returned, their silence was louder than words. The youngest clenched his fists, his pride burning. The middle muttered curses, but his anger seemed weaker now. The eldest sat and thought, his eyes dark and unreadable. He had seen warriors break under fewer lashes, yet a human had not. That evening, they entered Joran's quarters. The smell of blood and herbs filled the small room. He lay on his stomach, his back wrapped in bandages, his face pale with pain. When he saw them, he tried to rise, but his body refused. Instead, he looked at them with calm eyes. No fear, no begging, only calm. The youngest stepped forward, his voice sharp. Why? He demanded. Why would you suffer for her? Joran's breath was slow, his words hoarse but steady. Because she did not deserve it, he whispered. Better me than her. The brothers rose, the words striking deeper than any blade. He spoke simply, without pride, without demand, and in that moment, the eldest felt his chest tighten, for he saw not weakness, but strength, a strength he could not deny. The brothers left without another word, but in their eyes, something had changed. They had not yet bowed, not yet accepted, but respect had entered their hearts, even if they could not speak it. And in the days to come, that respect would grow, until the impossible happened. Warriors who once scorned humans would kneel before one. The humans' resolve. Joran's body was broken, yet his spirit did not bend. He lay in a small, dimly lit chamber, the air thick with the smell of herbs and blood. The bandages on his back were rough, barely holding against the wounds that burned like fire. Each breath came slow, heavy, but his eyes stayed open, steady. He did not ask for medicine. He did not beg for a healer. The alien girl visited often, slipping through shadows to bring water and food. Her silver hair caught the lantern light as she knelt beside him. You must take medicine, she whispered, her voice soft and trembling. You will die if you do not. But Joran shook his head, his lips set firm. I will not take what others need more, he said. There are children hungrier than me, workers weaker than me. The girl's eyes filled with tears, her hands gripping his arm. Why do you always give? She asked. Even when you have nothing left. Joran turned his head, his voice calm despite the pain. Because if I do not, who will? His words struck her heart, sharp as truth, for in her world, strength was measured by power, by fire, by fear. But this man, this human, showed strength in sacrifice. It was a strength she could not understand, yet could not deny. Outside his chamber, whispers still spread. Warriors spoke of the human who had endured 10 lashes. Some mocked him still, calling it luck, calling it foolishness. But others grew quiet when his name was spoken. Respect began to slip into voices that once held only scorn. The brothers watched from afar. They had not yet spoken their feelings, not yet admitted what they had seen. But they could not ignore the way their sister clung to Joran's words. They could not ignore how the colony now spoke of him in hushed tones. Each night, their pride warred with the truth in their hearts. One evening, the eldest brother entered the chamber, his steps heavy, his armor clinking in the silence. Joran stirred, lifting his head. The eldest stood over him, his glowing eyes sharp. You refuse medicine? He said, his voice like stone. Why? Joran's breath rattled, but his gaze did not falter. Because pain passes, he said, but honor stays. The eldest narrowed his eyes, studying the broken man. He had heard many warriors speak of honor, but none had bled for it so willingly. The youngest brother entered next, his anger still burning. You are full, he spat. You think pain makes you strong, but it makes you weak. Joran's lips curved faintly, almost into a smile. Then why are you here? He asked, his voice rough. The youngest froze, words caught in his throat. for though he despised the human, he could not stop himself from coming. The middle brother lingered last, his voice low. "You shame us," he muttered. "You shame warriors who call themselves proud." Joran's eyes closed for a moment, his voice no more than a whisper. "I did not mean to shame anyone," he said. "I only wished to protect her." The brothers stood in silence, their hearts heavy. None of them could answer, none of them could deny. The truth was simple, and it broke their pride. A human had done what they would not. A human had taken lashes in their place. That night, the alien girl sat beside Joran, her hands brushing his bandaged back. "You should rest," she whispered. "You should let go of this fight." But he shook his head slowly, his voice steady despite the pain. "No," he said, "this fight is who I am." Her eyes widened, tears spilling as she whispered, "You are stronger than any warrior I have ever known." In the days that followed, Joran refused to stay hidden. He returned to work despite the wounds, carrying stone, hauling wood. Every step tore at his flesh, but he did not stop. Aliens watched in silence as he moved, bleeding but unbroken. Some whispered he was mad, others whispered he was more than human. The brothers could not ignore it. Day after day, they saw him rise when others would fall. Day after day, they saw him work when others would rest. And though their pride resisted, respect began to take root. It grew quietly, like a seed beneath stone, but it grew all the same. At night, Joran lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The girl's voice echoed in his mind, "You are stronger than any warrior I have ever known." His body was broken, but his heart burned. He did not fight with claws. He did not fight with fire. He fought with resolve, with endurance, with the quiet strength of never giving up. And in the shadows, the brothers watched, their eyes no longer filled with scorn, but with something heavier. They had begun to see him not as a servant, not as weak, but as a warrior in his own right. The resolve of one human had started to change them, and soon, it would change everything. The trial of strength whispers had become too loud to ignore. Every corner of the colony spoke of the human who endured 10 lashes. Some called him mad, others called him strong. But among the warriors, pride burned like fire. They could not accept that a human, a servant, could carry honor greater than theirs. The alien girl's brothers argued late into the night. The youngest slammed his fist against the wall. "We cannot let this stand," he growled. "If he is honored above us, then we are nothing." The middle brother hissed, his eyes glowing sharp. "He took pain, yes, but pain is not strength." The eldest stayed silent for a long while, his face unreadable. At last, he spoke, his voice low but firm. "Then we will test him." The next morning, they came to Joran's quarters. He sat by the fire, his back wrapped in fresh bandages, his face pale from lack of sleep. The girl stood beside him, glaring at her brothers. "You will leave him alone," she said, her voice shaking with anger. But the eldest shook his head, his eyes locked on Joran. "No," he said, "he must stand." Joran lifted his head slowly, his eyes calm though his body trembled. "What do you want?" he asked. The eldest answered without hesitation. "A trial," he said. "You will face us, not to win, but to endure." The girl gasped, stepping between them. "He is still wounded. He cannot fight," she cried. But Joran's hand touched her shoulder gently. "It is all right," he whispered, his voice steady despite the pain. "I will face it." The warriors led him to the training yard. Crowds gathered quickly, drawn by the promise of spectacle. Humans lined the walls, their faces pale with fear. Aliens whispered, their voices sharp with doubt and curiosity. "Will he fall now?" they muttered. "Will his legend break?" The brothers stood in a circle, tall and broad, their armor gleaming. They carried no blades, only the strength of their bodies. Joran stepped inside the circle, barehanded, his back still raw from the whip. His breath came slow, his chest rising and falling with effort, but his eyes burned steady, unshaken. The eldest raised his hand, and the trial began. The youngest struck first, fast and fierce. His fist slammed into Joran's chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Gasps echoed from the crowd. but slowly, painfully, Joran pushed himself up, his knees shaking, his body trembling, yet he stood. The middle brother charged next, sweeping Joran's legs from beneath him. He hit the dirt hard. His breath knocked from his lungs. The crowd roared, some cheering, some jeering. Yet again, Joran rose, his face pale, his lips bloodied. He staggered, but he did not fall back down. The eldest stepped forward, his strike heavy as stone. Joran's body twisted, his ribs cracking under the force. He fell to one knee, his vision darkening. The girl screamed from the edge of the circle, "Stop, you will kill him." But Joran lifted his hand weakly, shaking his head. "No," he rasped, "let it continue." The brothers exchanged uneasy glances. This was no trick, no act. Each time he fell, he rose again. Each time he bled, his eyes still burned with the same fire. The crowd grew silent, the whispers fading. All they could hear was the sound of his breath, rough and steady. The youngest attacked again, knocking him down with a brutal kick. Joran coughed blood, his hands shaking as he pushed against the dirt. The middle struck his shoulder, and he stumbled sideways, nearly collapsing. The eldest struck his chest again, and he fell flat, the world spinning. But through the haze, one thought echoed in his mind. "I must stand." With a groan, he pushed himself up once more, his body broken, his wounds screaming, but his will unshaken. The crowd gasped as he rose again. Even the brothers rose, their pride cracking under the sight. At last, the eldest raised his hand, calling the trial to an end. "Enough," he said, his voice heavy. Joran stood swaying, his chest heaving, but his eyes locked on them. "You see," he whispered, his voice raw but strong. "Strength is not in the fall, it is in the rising." The words echoed across the yard. The warriors lowered their heads, their chests heavy for the first time. They saw the truth without denial. This human was not weak. He was not frail. He was stronger than pride, stronger than pain, stronger than fear. The crowd erupted in whispers, spreading like fire. Humans looked at Joran with hope. Aliens looked with an easy respect. The girl rushed forward, tears streaming, catching him as he finally collapsed into her arms. "You proved it," she whispered, holding him close. "You proved it to them all." The brothers stood in silence, their hearts torn. They had tested him to see him fail, but instead, he had shown them what true strength was. And though they had not yet bowed, the seed of honor had been planted, a seed that would soon grow into something greater than any of them expected. The bow of Warrior's training yard was silent after the trial. Dust floated in the air, glowing under the pale sun. Joran lay half-conscious in the arms of the alien girl, his body broken, his blood soaking the dirt. Yet even in his weakness, his eyes burned with the same steady fire. He had fallen many times, but he had always risen. The warriors stood still, their chests heavy, their hands trembling slightly. They had struck him again and again, yet he had not yielded. The crowd whispered in awe, voices spreading like waves. "Did you see?" they murmured. He rose after every blow. Even warriors do not rise so many times. Another whispered. The youngest brother clenched his fists, shame burning in his eyes. He had thought the human a fool, yet now he saw courage greater than his own. The middle brother's jaw tightened, his pride broken. He had mocked Joran's pain, yet now he respected it. And the eldest, the strongest of them all, lowered his gaze, for he knew the truth. No warrior among them had shown such resolve. The girl cradled Joran, her tears falling onto his face. "You should not have done this," she whispered. "They will never see you as one of them." But Joran shook his head weakly, his voice faint but steady. "I did not do it for them," he whispered. "I did it because it was right." The words struck her brothers like spears. Their pride cracked fully, leaving only truth. They exchanged looks, silent, their faces heavy with shame and respect. At last, the eldest stepped forward, his armor clanking. He fell to one knee in the dirt, his head lowered before the broken human. Gasps filled the yard, sharp as lightning. Never had a warrior knelt before a human. Never had pride been set aside so openly. The middle brother followed next, his movements slow but sure, his head bowed low, his voice a whisper. You are stronger than us. The youngest resisted, his pride fighting to the last. But when he met Joran's weary eyes that held no anger, no scorn, only quiet strength, his chest tightened, his knees weakened. With a growl, he too dropped to the ground, bowing his head low. The crowd erupted in shouts, disbelief and awe mixing in the air. Warriors kneeled to him, someone cried, they kneel to a human. Another shouted, humans in the crowd gasped, their eyes wide with hope. For the first time, they saw one of their own honored instead of broken. The girl's heart swelled with pride, her tears now mixed with joy. She looked at her brothers, kneeling before Joran. She looked at Joran himself, weak but unshaken, and she whispered, they see you now. The eldest brother lifted his head slightly, his voice strong enough for all to hear. By our honor, by our blood, we bow to the one who endured. The middle added, we bow not to his flesh, but to his spirit. The youngest growled, his pride cracking into respect. We bow to the one who rose again and again. The training yard roared with voices. Some dragons of pride spat in anger, refusing the sight, but many others bowed their heads in silence. For honor was the highest law, and honor could not be denied. Joran swayed in the girl's arms, his voice faint but clear. I am no warrior, he whispered, I am only a man. But the eldest shook his head, his eyes glowing bright. You are more than a man, he said. You are proof that strength is not born in blood, but in heart. The moment carved itself into memory. From that day, the tale would be told again and again. How 3 proud warriors knelt before a broken human. How scars became symbols of honor. How the weak became strong through resolve. That night, fires burned in the colony. Songs were sung in low voices, not of kings or warriors, but of the human who endured. Children whispered his name. Workers lifted their heads higher. And though Joran lay still, his body aching with every breath, he had already changed the world around him. The girl stayed at his side, her hand in his. Her brothers guarding the chamber silently. They did not speak much, but their presence was enough. For in their silence was respect. In their kneeling was truth. The human who had taken lashes, the human who had endured the trial, had earned the bow of warriors. And from that day forward, nothing would ever be the same. The new bond story of the kneeling spread through the colony like wildfire. By morning, every house, every market stall, every soldier's barrack whispered the same tale. 3 proud alien warriors, known for their strength and pride, had bowed before a broken human. It was unthinkable, impossible, yet it had happened before the eyes of all. For the humans of the colony, hope stirred where there had only been silence. They had always lived in the shadows, bent under the weight of chains and rules. But now, one of their own had been lifted above warriors. One of their own had been honored not with pity, but with respect. For the aliens, the tale cut deeper. Many resisted, their pride wounded, their voices sharp with anger. How can warriors kneel to a human? They spat. He is weak flesh, a servant, he cannot be honored. Yet even as they argued, the image of Joran's entrance burned in their minds. And honor, once spoken, could not be erased. Joran himself lay in his chamber, his body still broken, his back scarred. The alien girl sat by his side, her hand clasping his, her silver eyes soft with gratitude. Her brothers stood watch at the door, their presence heavy with unspoken promise. They did not call him weak anymore. They did not call him less. They called him brother. When Joran woke, his voice was weak but steady. You should not stay here, he whispered to the girl. You have family, you have honor. You do not need me. But she shook her head, her voice clear. You are my family now. You are the one who gave me honor. Her brothers stepped forward, their armor glinting in the firelight. The eldest spoke first, his voice deep and steady. You endured what even warriors fear, and for that, we owe you our loyalty. The middle added, you did not stand for yourself, you stood for her, and for that, we call you kin. The youngest clenched his fists, his pride still rough, but his voice firm. "You proved me wrong, and I will not forget it." Joran looked at them, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "I am only a man," he whispered. "I never wished for vows, or honor, or kin." But the eldest shook his head, his voice low but certain. "Honor does not ask what you wish. It comes to those who earn it." In the days that followed, change began to ripple through the colony. Humans walked with straighter backs, their eyes brighter. They whispered Joran's name as if it were a shield, a symbol of strength. Some aliens scoffed, refusing to accept the bond, but others began to nod in silence, a small gesture of respect where there had been none. The punishment ground, once a place of shame, became a place of memory. Workers would pass by and pause, their eyes lingering on the stones where blood had fallen. They would whisper, "Here he stood." Children pointed to the training yard, telling each other the story of the human who rose again and again. One evening, as the sun sank red over the horizon, the girl and her brothers led Joran into the courtyard. His steps were slow, his body still weak, but the crowd gathered anyway. Humans and aliens alike filled the space, their voices hushed. The eldest brother raised his voice so all could hear. "Here stands the man who took lashes not meant for him. Here stands the man who rose when others would fall." The middle brother's voice carried next, strong and proud. "We call him brother, we call him kin, and we will stand with him as he stood for us." The youngest growled low, his pride finally surrendered. "Any who dare call him weak will answer to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. For the first time in memory, warriors had spoken not only for their kind, but for a human. And when Joran lifted his head, his voice carried through the silence. "I do not seek power. I do not seek glory," he said. "I only seek what is right. No child should suffer. No life should be treated as less." The crowd roared, some in anger, many in awe. But none could deny his words. None could erase his scars. They were carved not only on his back, but into the memory of all who had seen. That night, as the fires burned high and songs echoed in the air, Joran sat quietly with the girl and her brothers. He did not feel like a hero. He did not feel like a legend. He felt only tired, yet at peace. The girl leaned against him, whispering softly, "You changed everything." And though Joran shook his head, his lips curved faintly, for deep down, he knew it was true. A bond had been forged in blood, pain, and honor. A bond between human and alien that no whip, no lash, no pride could ever break. The scars on his back would never fade, but they were no longer marks of punishment. They were marks of respect, and from that day forward, he would carry them not in shame, but in pride. The new bond had been born, and with it, the beginning of something greater than either race had ever known.